You are not going to believe this one. Imagine waking up, walking outside, and finding that someone has spray-painted giant red letters across your vehicle. Now imagine that someone is the HOA president, who thinks she's the queen of the neighborhood. And to top it off, the vehicle she vandalized wasn't just anyone's car. It belonged to a sheriff's deputy. This one got ugly fast. So, let me set the scene. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It's one of those HOA-controlled communities where everyone's yard is the same height, the fences are all the same color, and the mailboxes are regulation size. On paper, it sounds nice. But in reality, one word: Karen. Karen wasn't just on the HOA board, she was the board. At least in her own mind. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses on her face, and a permanent scowl, she roamed the streets like a self-appointed dictator. She loved writing violation notices for the smallest things. Grass too tall? Violation. Trash can visible for more than 30 minutes? Violation. Wrong shade of beige on your garage door? Violation. And she didn't just stick the little yellow notes on mailboxes. No, Karen had a flair for the dramatic. She taped them right to your front door, your windows, and sometimes even your car. Now, most of us in the neighborhood hated it, but we tolerated her because, well, it's Karen. Arguing with her was like arguing with a brick wall. But then, she made the biggest mistake of her life. About a year ago, a new family moved in. A quiet guy, his wife, and 2 kids. They kept to themselves, mowed their lawn, waved when you waved back. No drama. The guy's name? David. What none of us knew at first was that David wasn't just another neighbor. He was a sheriff's deputy in the county. And let me tell you, David's truck was his baby. A big black pickup, spotless, with all his gear stored neatly in the back. On duty or off duty, that truck was both his ride and his livelihood. So of course, it didn't take long for Karen to target it. The first time it happened, David parked his truck along the street in front of his own house. Perfectly legal. But Karen decided it was an eyesore and slapped a violation notice on his windshield. The rest of us couldn't believe it. She had never gone after someone's personal vehicle before. But David, he just chuckled, crumpled the paper, and threw it away. But Karen didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks, she escalated. First, it was multiple notices taped to his windows. Then she started leaving angry letters in his mailbox about oversized vehicles and disrupting neighborhood aesthetics. David stayed calm, polite, and firm. He reminded her that he was parked legally and that there was nothing in the HOA bylaws against trucks. But Karen wasn't interested in rules. She wanted control. And then came the day that blew everything up. It was a Saturday morning. The neighborhood kids were riding their bikes, people were mowing their lawns, and everything seemed normal. That's when Karen made her move. Marching across the street in broad daylight, she pulled out a can of bright red spray paint and scrawled huge letters across the side of David's black truck. Violation, remove immediately. We all froze. I was outside working on my garden, and I swear my jaw hit the dirt. People peeked through their blinds, phones in hand, recording. Karen was bold, confident, even smug, like she was some kind of sheriff herself, enforcing the law. But the real sheriff? He wasn't far away. David walked out of his house at that very moment, coffee mug in hand. He stopped dead in his tracks, staring at his freshly vandalized truck. The silence was thick. You could feel the tension in the air. Then David spoke, calm but with that edge in his voice that made your stomach drop. "Ma'am, step away from my vehicle." Karen laughed. "Oh, please. This thing has been violating HOA standards for months. I'm just making it official. Maybe now you'll finally move it." What she didn't realize was that the man she just vandalized wasn't some pushover neighbor. He was law enforcement. David set his coffee down on the porch rail, pulled out his phone, and made one quick call. 2 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the neighborhood. The deputies got out, took one look at the spray paint, and then at Karen, still holding the can, and it was game over. They asked her to put her hands behind her back. And Karen, Oh, she went full Karen. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. This is community enforcement. He should be arrested for that truck. Her screams echoed down the block as they cuffed her and walked her to the cruiser. Kids were filming on their phones, neighbors were whispering, and Karen's husband stood frozen in shock. The best part? She tried to wriggle free, shouting, "You'll all regret this. I run this neighborhood," before the door slammed shut. After that day, everything changed. Karen was charged with vandalism, destruction of property, and harassment. The HOA board immediately called an emergency meeting and voted her out as president. Apparently, they'd been tired of her antics for years but were too scared to challenge her until she finally crossed the wrong person. David, on the other hand, he became a hero. Not because he was law enforcement, but because he had the patience to put up with Karen until she literally spray-painted her own downfall. As for the truck, the department's detail shop buffed it out, good as new. But the story stuck. People still laugh about the day Karen thought she was above the law and got hauled off screaming in front of the whole neighborhood. So, what's the takeaway here? It's simple. No one is above the law. Not even a power-hungry HOA president with a spray can, a clipboard, and a superiority complex. Property is property, and respect is respect. When you start crossing lines, literally, with red spray paint, you're not enforcing rules anymore. You're breaking them. And that's the dangerous thing about entitlement. People like Karen truly believe they're invincible. They think that a title, like HOA president, gives them unlimited power. They convince themselves they're the judge, jury, and executioner of the neighborhood. But here's the truth. Power doesn't come from a clipboard or a title. Real power comes from responsibility, from fairness, and from respecting others. Karen thought she could bully her way into control. She thought no one would dare stand up to her. And maybe that worked for a while, until she messed with the wrong neighbor. The irony is almost poetic. She wanted to humiliate someone for parking legally, and instead, she ended up humiliating herself in front of the entire community. Because that's the kicker. Entitlement always meets reality. And reality doesn't care how loud you yell, how many notes you tape to someone's door, or how many times you shout, "I'm the HOA president." Reality is blind to arrogance. It doesn't bend for power trips. The law is the great equalizer. And when Karen decided to cross from petty notices into actual vandalism, she crossed a line she couldn't come back from. She thought she was untouchable. Instead, she was the one being touched by cold steel handcuffs. So the next time someone thinks they can stomp on your boundaries or act like rules don't apply to them, remember this story. Because eventually, the rules catch up with everyone. And sometimes, justice doesn't come quietly. Sometimes it shows up with flashing lights, a cruiser parked at the curb, and a neighborhood full of witnesses watching as the self-appointed queen of the HOA is hauled away, screaming, while her crown crumbles in real time. Karen wanted to make an example out of others. In the end, she became the example herself. And that's the ultimate lesson. Respect isn't forced, it's earned. And when you forget that, consequences have a way of reminding you.